For years, I was the guy to call if you had a squirrel in your attic. I mean, to a lot of people, I'm still that guy. But over the last 20 years, I've branched out to other less common infestations. Now, I'm the guy you call if there's a haunted doll rummaging through your attic or a Sasquatch trampling your flower beds. I love my job. The specializations I've acquired have allowed me to travel across the country, meet incredible people, and experience cryptids like few have ever done before. It doesn't hurt that the pay is great, but the stories are even better. I have one short story for you now. It's more of a public service announcement than anything else, really. I've dealt with every sort of infestation from Sasquatches, spray human urine around the area of the sighting, and it will avoid the area. Demonic presence usually need to bring a priest in, sometimes can be tricked into inhabiting a lesser creature, like a frog, and jackalopes. It's just a bunny with some antlers. Put in a cage and give that poor thing a carrot. But recently, there has been one cryptid that has been growing more and more invasive into human settlements. The hide behind. Most commonly found in the forest of the northern United States and Canada. The hide behind is one of the cryptids that can't easily be dealt with. In fact, I'm not sure it's even possible for one of these things to be bagged and tagged like we normally would with other cryptids. To my knowledge, no hide behind has ever been killed, maimed, dazed, or even simply removed from a residence. Once it has made claim to an area, whether it be a local forest, a cave, or even one particularly bloody case, a Bass Pro Shop, it will defend that area to the death. First documented by the Native Americans, then by lumberjacks in the PNW of America, the hide behind is one of the lesser known but cryptids on the continent, but without a doubt, one of the most dangerous. No one really knows what they look like. As the name suggests, as soon as they are seen, they quickly duck out of view to hide behind anything in the vicinity. In the wild, this would be trees and rocks. In your home, this could be a corner, a kitchen cabinet, a television, literally anything else, as they can manipulate their body to hide behind any object of any size. In the few accounts of sightings we've have on record, they have been described as everything from a large bear, lion hybrid, to a frail and elderly woman with long arms and rashes on her skin. Because of this wild discrepancy in their descriptions, they're believed to be shapeshifters that can change their shape based on what they believe will best get their potential victim to come closer and investigate the sighting. I don't know why the hide-behinds are moving into suburbs. I guess destruction of their natural habitat, but it is becoming a real problem. That's why I'm going to share this story with you now, so you know what to do if one shows up in your home. I put up to Tim's house around 12 p.m. on a Tuesday. He had called us to tell us that there was a demonic entity in his house and we needed to remove it ASAP. They always demand ASAP. Tim had nothing going on, but people are so much more demanding than they were 20 years ago. I took a quick look around the house. It was pretty apparent that there wasn't any sort of demon in his residence. Not only was there no reaction to holy water and Ouija board I had brought with me, but Tim also didn't have any normal symptoms of demonic haunting, bad dreams, sleep paralysis, or witnessing of any telekinetic events. After further questioning, he described what he had seen in more detail. First, I was sitting right there on the couch watching television when I got the feeling I was being watched. I turned my attention to the screen door, and for just a second I saw a bear looking in through the screen. But it wasn't a bear, you see. A bear would just keep on staring at me or keep poking at the door, but this thing, it ducked out of view as quick as can be, like it was trying to sneak up on me, and I had caught it in the act. It bothered me, something awful, but I just grabbed my gun, set it on my lap, and kept watching the TV, and eventually that feeling like if I was being watched just kind of melted off. It was all peaches and creams until she showed up a few days later. The she Tim was referring to was a new human form that the hide behind was taking. I assume it was because of the lack of reaction to the bear form it had taken previously and shown itself. Like I said earlier, the hide behind wants you to look for it to come nearer. Like an anglerfish, it dangles something in front of you in an attempt to bring you closer. It's a lazy hunter. I was out in the garage in my workshop and that feeling came over me again. That being watched feeling. I turn around and I'm looking out of my garage door and I don't see nothing. But then, out of nowhere, I see a lady head and shoulders pop out from the corner of the garage, and the second she sees me eyeing her, she pops right back around the last corner where she came from. Well, this time, I went looking around for her. I gave a wide berth around the corner because I lived in New York City for 70 years, so I've seen some crazy people, and she looked crazy. And I didn't want her grabbing me, so I gave a wide berth around the corner, and there wasn't no one there. I walked all around the house, and I didn't see anyone. Not even footprints. Tell me that ain't demonic. It wasn't demonic. It was a hide behind, I told the man as such. I told him living out here on the edge of town made him an easy target for it. I told him that there really isn't any way to get rid of it or scare them off. I told him that we could try to leave his house for a year at minimum, and maybe with luck it would just leave on its own. But the best bet would be for him just to burn the place down and never come back. He didn't like that answer. My family lived in this house for 3 generations. I ain't leaving, and I sure as hell ain't burning nothing down. I'll tell you what I'm gonna do. I'll keep my shotgun on me, and when I get that feeling again, I'll shoot it. Works for bears, and that's the meanest thing around these parts. Don't see why it wouldn't work for this, what you call it, hide behind? You can't argue with anyone over the age of 65. People get set in their ways, their beliefs calcify, so instead I was honest with him. I told him 2 things. The first thing I told him was that eventually he'd get that feeling that he was being watched, and he'd get his gun, and he'd start looking around for the hide behind. Only he wouldn't find it. That's what happens in all these cases, because at that point, it found the best hiding spot it can possibly get. The only place you won't be able to lay eyes on it, even if you tried, directly behind you. At that point, it's too late for you. The second thing I told him was that I'd be back in 2 days, and more likely, he'd be dead. And then I left. 2 days later, I pulled into Tim's driveway to find the screen door open and blowing in the wind. I didn't even need to cross the threshold to his house to find him. He was everywhere. On the floor, on the ceilings, the walls. The smell was unbelievable. I poured some gasoline on the porch and lit the match. The house was an inferno within 30 seconds. I got into my van and started to pull away from the driveway. And I took one last look at the house, and then beyond it, into the tree line. There I saw, for just a split second, a young boy before he quickly pulled back and disappeared behind the thin little tree. I was 100 miles away by lunchtime. I say all this to tell you, if you ever think you might have a hide behind in your house or even the area, leave. Burn the place down if you can so people don't move in. These things are like bears. If they know where they can get food someplace, they're just gonna keep coming back. And if you ever get the feeling that you're being watched and you can't figure out why, call your loved ones, because it's standing right behind you. A few days ago, I posted a PSA on this website about what to do if you encounter a hide behind in your local area. Well, a few hours after that, I checked my inbox and had about 1 million questions from 250,000 people. What kind of van do you drive? 2003 Dodge Sprint van with Ratman spray paint on the side. Will my body wash attract a succubus? No, but they are intensely attracted to frustrated virgins, so you may or may not have a problem there. Can I come along on one of your jobs? Absolutely not. I barely make it out alive half of the time myself. But the most common question I received was, how'd you get started in the business? Now, I'm a busy man, like I said in my last post. Halloween is right around the corner, and this is my peak season. Unless y'all want your toddler running up to a house where half of the Halloween decorations ain't actually Halloween decorations, well, you gotta let me work. So in lieu of answering how'd you get started in the biz to y'all individually, I'll post the story of my first job here to nip any further asking of the question in the bud. In the year 2000, I was 22 years old and starting my life in the biz, as y'all been calling it. Pulling snakes out of toilets, charging down skunks using a trash can lid as a shield against its spray. I loved my job. It wasn't any different than what I did as a kid growing up in the middle of Georgia. Only now I was getting paid for it. Money wasn't great, but small town living is cheap, and it kept a roof over my head and food on the table. Over time, through word of mouth, my little business grew, and I was the premier rat man in Teleferro country. Granted, the country population was less than 2,000, so business wasn't exactly booming, but hey, I'm proud of it. One day, I'm in the trunk, this was before I got the van, in the Taco Bell drive-thru, and I got a call on my cell. Unknown number. I answered. Telephone rat man, you need something? The voice on the other end was frantic, screaming about there being something stuck in his mudroom, but wouldn't give any specifics. I could tell from the man's accent and his clear discomfort in the idea of an animal being in his house that he was a city folk. You know, a real-life Atlanta dandy. Some of these city folk had a second home on the nearby lakes, Ocean and Clark Hill, but I was shocked when he told me he had a home in Union County, nearly 130 miles away. I asked him how he got my number, and he told me that he had found one of my business cards on his kitchen table. I told him I would be there in 3 hours and hung up. Now, here's the fishy part. I didn't have any business cards. I still don't, but I still get calls sometimes from people saying they found my card on the kitchen table or in their pocket or slipped under the windshield wiper of the car. One lady about 10 years ago said that she got in the shower and my phone number was written there in a fogged up mirror. The woman straight up thought I was the devil until I got a family of pugwagees out of her basement. Got them jealous by talking loudly on the phone about how much nicer and more expensive the nearby cave system was than this horrible basement. After that, she thought I could walk on water. Truth is, I don't know what is pushing business my way. I don't know why I was chosen to do the work I do, but the fact of the matter is, I was chosen for it. Well, anywho, back to my first job. I pulled up to the client's house, or I guess better word for it would be compound. The property was completely surrounded by a 7-foot security fence that contained the main house, a small chicken run, a sauna, and a handful of small windowless buildings that dotted the forestry property. After speaking to the owner via intercom, he remotely opened the gate and greeted me in as I was pulling up the driveway of his main house. He was a weary, rat-faced, dead-eyed man who looked and smelled like he hadn't showered in days, maybe weeks. His greasy hair clung to an even greasier forehead as he reached his open hand towards me. "Hello, we spoke on the phone. My name's Dave." His accent betraying him as a foreigner in these parts. "Elmer," I replied. "Not from around here, Dave." "Oh." Dave's face dropped as if he was upset that he had been so easily discovered as an outsider. "Oh no, not from the south. This is a vacation house for the family, and the winters down here are mild compared to up north." I couldn't believe this guy had a wife smelling like he did. "Where's the family?" "I'm down here doing some maintenance just for the week. The whole family won't be down here for another 2 months or so." "Alright, well, what's the problem?" Dave steps close to me, I mean really close, like Eskimo kisses close, and asks me, "You do this stuff often, huh? Your car makes you seem so." Thankfully, he took a step back. "Honestly, I'm not even sure where I got this card in the first place." "You, got the card on you, Dave?" "Here," he handed the card over to me. It was a plain white business card with black text that read, "Elmer Ratman Boggs, Animal Control and Cryptid Specialist. His prices are unbelievable." The back of the card had a little picture of a ghost along with my phone number. It's at this point I should tell you, these cards are different every time. I don't know where they come from, and I've stopped caring. Each one has some stupid pun on it. "He's got the spirit. Half price on April Fool's Day." I've seen one that had a picture of me wearing a French maid outfit with the words, "Plagued by paranormal entities? Call Elmer," splashed across it. I don't like that one, and I have no idea where that picture of me came from, so don't ask. "Yeah, I deal with these kind of things all the time," I said. "Now show me where the critter's at." Dave led me down the hill on which the main house stood and out to one of the smaller buildings that punctuated the tree line. "It's in there," Dave said as we approached a small shed about 10 feet by 10 feet. A large padlock held the door in place. "I thought you said it was in your mudroom," I asked. "Yes, well, I was panicked on the phone, I suppose," Dave explained. As you can see, we keep chickens here, and when the boys are here, we like to go hunting. This is where we clean and butcher our animals." Good enough explanation for me. "Open it up." Dave opened it up and practically ran back towards the main house as I stepped into the room. It was all white, painted cinder block walls, fluorescent lights, laminating flooring with a drain in the middle of the room. A large hook hung from the ceiling to hang a deer carcass. There was a countertop with a sink and a few drawers, probably knives in there, a wall-mounted security camera. I'd like to know more about that, but what really demanded my attention was floating on the air on the top of the counter of the room facing the wall. It was a human head. I couldn't believe it. Nowadays, this is an average Wednesday, but imagine you're in my position. Your neighbor calls you over to get help to get a raccoon out of the attic. Then you get there and he's all, "Oh, wait, never mind. It's a decapitated human head. Oh, yeah, and it flies around like a helium balloon." That's right, folks. A floater on my first day. A real trial by fire. I didn't panic, not sure how, but I didn't. I took a step back slowly, but apparently not slow enough, as I watched the head turn to face me. It was a woman's head. Long black hair, eyes gouged out, black dried blood caked all over it, and it had a tail. A few inches of a spinal column sticking out the bottom. I stepped out of the shed and slammed the door before it did anything else. Dave called to me. I turned to see his smelly ass calling from the upstairs window of the main house. Fucker was just gonna leave me to die out there? Can you get rid of it? Oh yeah, buddy, I can do that. I was talking right out of my ass. But we need to talk. I told Dave I could get it out, but it would be very expensive. Very, very expensive. I also told him that I would need time, a few days. I made up some bullshit about rituals and waiting for the correct phase of the moon. But in reality, I had no idea what I was going to do, and I just needed enough time to look around the internet and to figure out what the hell I was dealing with and how it could be handled. I told him that I'd have to go home to get things ready, but I'd be back in a few days to fix his floating head problem. He made a counteroffer. He'd give me cash in advance right now to go into town and gather all the necessary supplies for rituals and the cleansing, and I could stay the night in his property so I wouldn't have to drive the 3 hours home. He'd also give me an additional bonus if I could have the cursed noggin removed within the next 24 hours. I asked him if he had internet access. He did. I accepted. I could kill 40,000 rats and still not make the money I was going to make in the next 24 hours if I could pull this off. I took the extremely generous cash advance and zipped out of the compound to buy my supplies. I drove the 40 minutes south to Dahlonega, an old mining town, and found an electronics store where I bought a laptop, computer, and a mouse. That's all I really needed, but I couldn't go back empty-handed when I'd promised an elaborate ritual. So I popped into a few novelty gold mine stores and bought some fool's gold, a few pretty rocks, a nice hat, that was just for me, and a peacock feather. Then I headed back to the compound. I spent the entire driveway back pinching myself, wondering if I had finally lost my marbles, questioning my faith, replaying every single episode of the X-Files over and over in my head. I decided it didn't matter if I was crazy or not. Either way, it was happening. I got back to the compound, parked the car, brought my newly bought equipment up to the room I would be using on the second floor of the main house, then asked Dave for the key to the shed. I wanted one more look at the head. I slowly opened the shed door and peeked inside. The head was still floating in the top corner of the room facing the wall. I stood for a while watching it. It slowly bobbed up and down as it was floating on water. I watched what little of the neck was left vibrate as the gentle moans emanated from it. I cleared my throat. The head slowly turned towards me. Its expression didn't change. It didn't lose any elevation either. It seemingly wasn't interested in me at all. I took a quarter out of my pocket and tossed it up towards the head, where it plinked off its cheeks and bounced down to the floor below. The head remained neutral. This thing didn't give a shit about me. Might as well have called it my dad. This was the hardest part when I started the gig. How do you tell the difference between a gnome and a leprechaun, a fairy and an elf, a wendigo and a skinwalker? What happens if you get it wrong? I'll tell you what happens. You get hurt or you die. 6 years ago, I made a mistake of misidentifying a band of Nimmergar as a rocky mountain hill dwellers, and I lost 2 fingers and a bite-sized chunk of my ass. I've learned my lesson the hard way. Research, research, research. It's the name of the game. And this was a tough case to start with. Floating heads appear all over the Native American folklore, especially in the Iroquois and the Wyandid histories, but their heads were different. For one, they had wings and talons. The one I was dealing with floated. They're also like 6 feet tall, and this one is like your regular sized everyday disembodied head that just so happened to take flight. There's also the behavior. The Iroquois version of the head just kind of flew around and terrorized anyone who was unlucky to have stumbled across it, while the Mohawk histories say it's out for revenge against those who gave it an unjustified death. But the big problem with oral histories is that they change. One day someone can remember something, and so they throw out their own wrinkle in there. It's like centuries-long game of telephone that started with Jessica has great hair and ends with death metal head eats babies. At least this head didn't seem to mind my company. It wanted whatever was in the direction of the top corner of the shed it was entombed in, and I just couldn't for the life of me figure out what that was. I had a hunch, but nothing solid yet. I looked at the clock and realized it was nearly midnight. I opened my door to head over to the bathroom to piss and wash my face, and ran directly into David, who had seemingly been standing right outside my door. "Big day today," he said. "Yes sir, big day. Will you get it done? Does the Pope wear a funny hat?" "Amusing." He didn't smile. "I'm fixing to wash my face before I head to bed, but we'll be out of here bright and early tomorrow morning." Wow, Dave didn't seem happy to be included in the last sentence. Yes, sir. I'll need your help with the ritual. I said back to him. Two-man job. This isn't what I'm paying you for, he sneered. Don't worry, you won't have to do anything. Just need you in your room. I was talking out of my ass again. Just need you holding a peacock feather is all. Humph. He exhaled from his nose sharply and stared at me with his dead black eyes for a few seconds before marching off. Good night. I was washing my face in the bathroom and I realized I never picked up an extra toothbrush when I was in town. Now, I don't know about where you're from, but people I know always have an extra toothbrush laying around, especially people with families like Dave said he had. So I did a little light snooping through the drawers in the bathroom, and you know what I found? It wasn't a toothbrush. It was a loose panel on the base of the bathroom counter. I quietly pulled it back and found stuffed inside a hammer and a plastic bag. I opened the plastic bag and dumped the contents into my hand. Driver's licenses, a dozen of them at least, all women. I fingered through them quickly, looking at all the pictures, names, and dates, when one of them caught my eye. Misty O'Connor. I recognized her immediately, because you never forget the face of the first flying decapitated head you see. You just don't. I don't make the rules. This fucking guy. Dave, my hunch was right. The cameras, the multiple deer cleaning shacks, the 7-foot security wall. To protect from what, Dave? The extremely high turkey population of the Union County? No way, Jose. I knew what I was going to do. The next morning, Dave unlocked the shack and held it shut while I gave him instructions. He was going to stand off to the right side of the shed while I went inside to tie a blindfold around the head. Once the head was blind, I would signal him to come in and he would place a peacock feather in the head's mouth. Then I told him that the head would disintegrate into a fireball and he could pay me the rest of the money. It was all bullshit, of course, but if brains was made out of leather, old Davey would hardly saddle a June bag. I took over holding the door from Dave and motioned him to walk to the right side of the shed. I felt the pressure on the other side of the door relax as the head floated to the right, following its senses of where Dave was. I entered the shed and found the head floating at the chest height, gnashing at its teeth at the wall that protected Dave. Hey, Misty. Shh. It's okay, I told the head in the same voice I use for dogs and cats and sometimes lizards. I'm on your side. We're gonna get this son of a bitch. I looped a piece of cloth around the head, covering the empty sockets of where the eyes used to be, and held the two loose ends in my hand like a leash. The head pulled gently as if agreeing to my unspoken plan. My other hand held the piece of fool's gold for literally no reason. Other than convincing shit for brains, Dave, my plan totally legit. Aight, now Dave, come in! I shouted towards the door. The head of Misty O'Connell pulled the leash gently, following the path Dave took as he walked to the perimeter of the building. Dave then appeared in the doorway looking like a total idiot by holding his peacock feather towards the head like a priest would a crucifix towards a vampire. So, all I have to do is put the feather in the mouth, Dave asked, his voice cracking and clearly terrified. I faked straight and sucked in a few short breaths, pretending to be fighting for my life, holding back this monster. Just do it already, I can't hold it back much longer. Dave shrieked as he shoved the peacock feather into Misty's mouth, then slowly pulled the feather in with its lips and teeth and gave a few over-exaggerated cow-like chews before swallowing. The mangled feather dropped from the open neck at the bottom of the head and landed on the floor with a wet plop. I stopped straining and started to relax. It's working! It's losing energy! I shouted at Dave in a fake acceleration. So, that's it? Dave asked, catching his breath. We killed this bitch! The head tugged on its leash a little harder at his last words. We got her, I said back. Then I don't need you anymore, Dave said. In one fluid motion, he pulled out a knife out from behind his back and lunged for me. Everything went according to plan. Released the blindfold/leash. Missy was on Dave like a pit bull on a preschooler. First she bit his knife-wielding hand off at the wrist. Then in his split-second confusion, she bit a sizable chunk out of his neck. Dave collapsed in a bloody heap on the floor, trying to bat his one victim with his remaining hand. But she was far too quick for him. By the time he tried to swat her, she was already on the other side of his body, biting off another chunk. Eventually, he stopped fighting, and that's when it got really gruesome. He lay on the floor of his kill room crying and begging for mercy like so many women had done before, and just like those women, he wouldn't get any. I looked away, but the horrible sound of breaking bone made me look back. Missy's jaw was unhinging, breaking, expanding. Then, like a ball constructor, she began the tedious process of slowly, almost tenderly, swallowing him whole. She started at the feet, which were easy enough, but around the thighs she began to flick her chin forward to tilt her head back to help the fresh meat go down. Less snake-like and more Komodo dragon-like. Dave screamed the entire time. The last thing to go was one of Dave's outstretched arms, which he greedily slurped up like a noodle. I'm not gonna lie, once she finished, it was awkward. We both just kind of looked at each other for what felt like an eternity. Eventually, I had to break the silence. It just felt too weird, so I said, "Hi, Misty." Then I immediately felt like an idiot for saying something so stupid. What am I, 5? After a few seconds, Misty erupted into a fireball and completely vanished. Turns out I was actually right about that part. Felt good to be right. I phoned the police and answered their questions when they showed up, told them I was here for an appointment and noticed some weird shit. They searched the property and that was that. They found 2 other girls, one of them was still alive. Of course, they think Dave is on the run, but it at least gave some families closure. Then I walked back to my truck, upset about not getting paid more than the advance, which I had already spent. When I felt a weight in my pocket, I reached in and put out an envelope of cash. That's how it works. A lot of business cards. I have no idea how. It just shows up and I don't ask questions. I hope this answers some of your questions. Maybe after Halloween I can answer a few more for y'all. Maybe I could tell you about the 2 years I spent traveling. Either way, I hope you enjoyed my stories. And if you ever need me, you already have my card.